Looking for NFL football? Stop right here. You found your home for weekly NFL talk and fantasy football. Coming to you live from the BackupPunter.com. This is the Backup Punter Podcast. Now, here's your host, the man who thinks fullbacks win championships, Keegan Matheson.
Week 2, it's in the books, and if you are anything like me, you have some work to do. This Waiver Wire Tuesday. This is the Backup Punter Podcast, episode number 25. We've made it 25. Thank you for your continued support over Twitter, over Facebook, subscribing on iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, wherever you find the podcast. I do thank you. I'm glad you're back again, and we are going to talk more fantasy football, and there is a lot to talk about this week. This has been a strange season already. It really has been. And whether it's injuries, whether it's underperforming superstars in your roster, I've got a bit of both. I've got a lot of both. You've probably got some questions right now. And we're going to start at the top with some injuries. We'll work our way through those, how they will impact your roster. With things like Tony Romo, Drew Brees, how are they going to impact the guys around them? And then we'll go through our studs and duds. And at the end of this whole thing, we'll give you some sleepers, some waiver wire streamers to look out for today that can hopefully help you patch this roster back together. Because I'll be on the waiver wire pretty hard today. It was a rough week in fantasy for me. I squeaked out one win that I probably didn't deserve because I made that addition to the Denver Broncos before Thursday Night Football. That saved me. But man, there were some goose eggs, let me tell you. Now this podcast, as always, it's brought to you by the good people at DynastySportsEmpire.com, Dynasty Sports Empire Fantasy Sports. So whether you're into NFL, NBA, NHL, Major League Baseball, you got to check them out. Visit them online, DynastySportsEmpire.com, or on Twitter. So check them out at DSE_hockey or DSE_basketball. It's almost time to get back into the hockey fantasy basketball leagues. Like I said, I'm a big fantasy hockey guy, not quite basketball. Not quite yet. But if you are, you've got to check them out. It's the best you can find. So we're going to jump right into the injury news right now. And the big one that we're certain of is Tony Romo. Now, we'll get to this a little bit later. It makes Dallas an attractive opponent for streaming defenses. But with Tony Romo's injury, the clavicle, the collarbone injury, whichever it is, it looks like it's going to be an 8-week recovery, putting him kind of in line with Dez Bryant. Dez Bryant's still such a wild card with his return. So what does this do to the Dallas Cowboys? Well, thankfully for Dallas, they've started out 2-0. That is a big thing for them. If they were 1-1 right now, that would be worrisome. But Dallas can afford to drop a game or two off the back end without Tony Romo. Brandon Weeden is the guy now, and that's terrifying because he's not someone that I'm even that wild about having on a roster, and I'm talking about a 53-man roster in the NFL, let alone starting 8 games. So over the next couple days, you'll see the Cowboys bring in another quarterback because they have to. They don't have a backup right now. So what does this do for the team? Well, without Dez Bryant already, it puts Terrence Williams into the number 1 receiver spot. You'll see a lot more Cole Beasley out of the slot. And they're going to try some guys. They're going to try guys like Devin Street, and these physical projects that I really don't think are going to amount to anything. For the most part, it's going to be the Jason Witten show, I think, especially with Brandon Weeden in there. And this is where they're going to need that ground game to wake up because it's been, Lance Dunbar has been a good receiver. You've gotten a little bit from Darren McFadden, a little bit from Joseph Randle. Christine Michael is still there, but somebody needs to step up for the Dallas Cowboys. They've got the best offensive line you could ask for, so they're going to be able to hide Brandon Weeden. I think you'll see a lot of Lance Dunbar out of the backfield. Some dump-offs, some bubble screens to keep it away from Weeden, because starting his career with the Cleveland Browns, that kind of ruins a guy. It's like RG3 with the Redskins. It's like Jamarcus Russell on the Raiders. Different situations, but when you start your career by seeing 1,000 guys in your backfield every time you drop back, when you start your career by failing, it's tough to get back on the horse. It's tough to turn that corner. and he's going to struggle to do that with the Cowboys. Thankfully, as long as he can give the ball back to Tony Romo with a 5-5, 6-5 record, which means that all he'd need to do is go 3-5 or 4-5, then that should be okay. That should be enough. Now, the injury that has me really interested, because we don't know what the hell is going on, is Drew Brees down in New Orleans. This was a strange one. He looked very poor against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Lost most of us a place in a suicide pool, but it is what it is. Those pools don't really matter. They're more of they're a fun thing, but between him and the Miami Dolphins, if there's someone left in your survivor pool, pat them on the back. Good job. With Drew Brees, after the game, it came out, and it's one of these things, it was a slow trickle of news. It came out that, well, he does have a shoulder injury. He experienced weakness, pain. Well, it looks like it's something more serious. The reports have gone anywhere from he's out for the season to we're going to reevaluate him at practice this week. It's a bit ridiculous. It's all over the place. So you have to pick who you believe. If you're a Drew Brees owner in fantasy, you want to jump on the waiver wire today and grab yourself a backup just in case, because it looks like you're going to need him. I don't think you want to grab McCown, his actual backup, despite how fantastic his commercials are. But you've got to grab somebody. And what does that do for the team around him? Well, if McCown is their starter, I think that you've got to like Mark Ingram a bit more, CJ Spiller. I think that it will really turn into a ground game. I don't think it does really anything for the wide receivers, Brandon Cooks. I don't think it does anything for Coleman, definitely not for Colston. Nothing's going to pick up out wide. Maybe it will stay the same if they really drive the passing game. But I think you've got to like this for the running game. Now, I'm a Mark Ingram owner. It's one of my flaws, I guess, this season. He has not looked good. He's creeped into the end zone a couple times, and that saved him. But what's going to go on there? Kyrie Robinson looked better on Sunday. So keep an eye on that Saints backfield. Get out ahead of it, but don't wait if you're a Drew Brees owner, because that will get you in trouble. Because my guess here is that it's going to be at least a few weeks. Let's guess in the middle, shall we? It's usually safe. Another game this week that really caught some people by surprise was the Philadelphia Eagles attempting to play professional football. This one is buzzworthy. I would love to be listening to Philadelphia sports talk radio right now. And one thing that I heard before the season that stuck with me, I think it was on the Pro Football Talk podcast, and Mike Florio that does that show, before the season, and I took this as kind of, settle down. But he'd said something to the effect of, this season, Chip Kelly will either be exposed as a genius or he will be exposed as a fraud. And, with this system that he's running, everyone has expected it to kind of, not transcend the game, but almost surprise the game. Really find the weaknesses in other defenses. It was an offense where you could plug in Sam Bradford or Mark Sanchez, Nick Foles, and they would still put up numbers. It's kind of that college offense mentality. An offense where you can plug in new players every 2 or 3 years when they graduate and still get results. That has not been the case. Sam Bradford, he's completed 66% of his passes, 2 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. He hasn't had much help. His wide receivers have been dropping everything they touch. But with Bradford, how the hell is he supposed to do anything without a running game? DeMarco Murray, 21 carries, 11 yards this year. At this rate, for him to top 1,800 yards like he did last year, he's probably going to need to play 500 games. It's ridiculous. And if you're Chip Kelly, you're feeling the heat right now. You're feeling the hot seat. Now, for Chip Kelly, it doesn't matter at all, because if the Eagles fire him, then some college program in the States will blow their brains out to sign him. They'll give him 10 blank checks and 5 pens with ink refills just to write numbers on them. So he can't really feel too bad, but if you're an Eagles fan right now, you have to. And an injury that is real big there, Kiko Alonso, it looks like he could have a potentially serious knee injury. Something that might put him out for the year. If that's the case, this Philadelphia Eagles pass defense could revert back to what it was last year, which is bad. Kiko Alonso is an excellent cover inside linebacker, and that's not something that gets any headlines because it's not really a sexy talent. People don't get excited about linebacker coverage, but man, is he good. He can really cover from inside linebacker, and that lets the safeties be safeties. That lets the cornerbacks be cornerbacks because he can handle the tight ends, the running back out of the backfield. And that really balances things out. Without him, that's a problem. So it will be interesting to see what they do. They have to commit to the run game this week. They need to, because without that, I have difficulty putting any of this on Sam Bradford. Now, he hasn't done well. He's made mistakes that are 100% his fault, and he's made quite a few of them. But how is he supposed to do anything when his starting running back is averaging not 5.5 yards per game, or sorry, not per carry, but per game? I buried the lead there. But 5.5 a game. You can't do anything with that. I don't care who you are. So if we keep going through week 2 action, the big Thursday night game, which I mentioned earlier, the one that saved me. I was sitting on the waiver wire Thursday afternoon because, of course, like any of you, I hit the waiver wire on Tuesday. I spend Wednesday second-guessing myself. I go into a bit of a panic on Thursday and really regret some moves. But at the last minute, I grabbed Denver off the waiver wire not because I believe that the Chiefs would perform poorly, but I'm just a big believer in the Denver Broncos defense. Their secondary, their linebacking core, their pass rush, I think they have the talent to be a top 3 overall defense in 2015 without much problem at all. And thank God they paid off. Now, it didn't look good at first. Alex Smith and the Chiefs drove down the field. I'm there watching the game. I was in the States on vacation last week. And I'm just, spending my vacation holed up in a room, getting grumpy at a television, regretting my decision. But then there was the strip, the fumble recovery, 1 of 3 on the day. They got to Alex Smith early and often, and they looked fantastic. The same cannot be said for their quarterback, Peyton Manning. Now, this was a frustrating game to watch because, like many of you, I've got one eye on the TV, one eye on Twitter. What's the conversation going? And Peyton Manning started out terribly. So, of course, people are burying him, taking him out of the Hall of Fame, all of this. And then, later on in the game, Peyton Manning brings the team back, and you get the wave of tweets that's even more annoying, of the people who said, I never doubted Peyton Manning. How dare you all doubt the great Peyton Manning? Shut up. You're allowed to say that Peyton Manning is bad when he's playing bad, and you're not wrong when he starts to play good. You can't reach back and drag it out like that. That's just, you're fishing. People like that on Twitter, sincerely, from me, shut up. Just let it be. This doesn't need to be an argument about Peyton Manning, but it's definitely a conversation. Even when Peyton Manning did turn it around and drive the Broncos back into that game, his arm cannot be making you that comfortable. He was throwing up, his passes, they looked like punts. They floated and floated and floated. And somebody tweeted out that the Broncos receivers should be calling fair catch on Peyton Manning's passes. That was my tweet of the night, I think. I love that. And a lot of this is, Peyton Manning, as his arm strength deteriorates, which it is. And frankly, I don't care if it is. It is. That's the fact. He needs to adjust. A ball that normally would take 1.2 seconds to get to his receiver now takes 1.3 or 1.4. So he has to throw it maybe 2 or 3 degrees more in front of a receiver. Do you catch my drift? He needs to adjust to his own arm strength to start his accuracy really honing in again. And that's what was happening at the end of the game. He found his level, and he was working better within his limitations, which is great, but I'm still worried about those limitations. Especially, kind of like our boy Sam Bradford. Well, my boy, he's on a roster. I've got a choice to make. But with Peyton Manning, he needs a run game to step up. Is that going to be C.J. Anderson? Ronnie Hillman? I think this week we are going to get Denver's hand tipped. Ronnie Hillman might lead the backfield this week, in which case I'll be very happy. I don't think I'm going to start him from my bench, but I've got him on the bench. So keep an eye out for that. One thing that I did not like that the Broncos did, I don't think they allowed Peyton Manning to be Peyton Manning for much of the game. He is going to win and lose the game before the snap is even brought back to the quarterback. He making his pre-snap reads, his blitz adjustments, these things. I didn't see enough of that from the Broncos. Whether that's Gary Kubiak trying to run too much of a hard-lined offense, what that is, I have no idea. But it didn't seem like Peyton Manning was being Peyton Manning, patrolling the line. The sheriff was not on duty for the first half of that game. So I'm not taking that comeback win as a complete, overarching, yes, the Broncos are okay. I'm still a bit worried. I really am, especially as the season goes on, but good on them. One thing I would be worried about is if I'm a Demaryius Thomas owner, how sustainable he will be. But we'll see. So let's get into the studs and duds for week 2 that is, in fantasy football. And of course, you can always find these on thebackuppunter.com. If you want to follow along on Twitter, on Facebook, it's at @thebackupunter. The Backup Punter on Facebook. You'll see these pushed right into your feed, so you don't have to go through that laborious process of opening a browser and typing in a website. I don't want to do that to you. Come on. So let's go quickly through the stud and dud team. And again, to be the stud quarterback or the stud running back, that doesn't mean you were the number one scorer at the position. For example, Tyrod Taylor is our QB1 on the stud team this week. He was projected to probably be outside of the top 20, but he finished in the top 5. That beats out some guy who was projected to be top 10 and finishes top 3. It's really overcoming expectations, helping your team win a week from where you weren't expected. And Tyrod Taylor proved this week that he can stack numbers. And what I mean by that is I thought that Tyrod Taylor would be a quarterback who is hidden on the Buffalo Bills, which some weeks he will be. A guy who puts up, passes for 65%, but only puts up 190 yards with a touchdown. Effective football, but for fantasy purposes, not enough numbers. Well, he did it this week. 242 passing yards, 43 on the ground, 4 total touchdowns. That helped cover up the 3 interceptions, thankfully. He's got some stuff to work on, but that worked out for him. He should be roster leagues. RB1 on the stud team, we've got D'Angelo Williams again. Story for D'Angelo Williams, and he was a week winner for a lot of you. Then RB2 is Matt Jones. Well, in the context of my roster, you'll see it wasn't a terrible mistake, but one of those things where you Matt Jones. Wide receiver 1, an old friend of many rounds. He might not be dead yet. We'll see. Don't expect any more of that, but great to see from Larry Fitzgerald. Wide receiver 2, our returnee, Antonio Brown. He nearly topped 200 yards. He will be back probably every week. And wide receiver 3, one I was really excited to see make the team, Allen Robinson of the Jaguars. If anyone cracks the stud team, it's going to be him. He found the end zone. He is Blake Bortles' biggest target, most talented target, most anything target. Well, Mercedes Lewis is bigger, but God, Allen Robinson is better. And if he can get consistent targets, just as much of it relies on Bortles as it does on him. That's an issue. But man, he's talented. And then the tight end for the stud team, Crockett Gilmore of the Baltimore Ravens. Now, Max Williams, their rookie, Crockett Gilmore is big, he's athletic enough, and it looks like he's the number 2 option. Top of my head, I think it was 88 yards he had. Big day. Unfortunately, I don't think the Broncos are the stud defense. Now, looking at the dud team, there were some absolute weak killers this week. Not just the 2, 3, 4-point games. I'm talking negatives. I'm looking at you, Keenan Allen. I'm looking at my roster. I'm not happy. There were negatives this week from your stars. That can't be good. The QB of the dud team, sorry, God, he's not on the stud team right now, Sam Bradford. Again, it was an ugly one. He scrounged up some points late, thankfully. If you own Sam Bradford, roster a backup. I'm going to later today. RB1 on the dud team, Jeremy Hill. This was a guy that I expressed more confidence in than almost any top 10 running back entering the season. Behind Eddie Lacy, Jeremy Hill might have been the guy I was most confident in. Maybe Jamal Charles, but a bad day for him. Maybe it's not going to be that dominated split I'd expected. Gio Bernard got some touches, and he looked good. That's something to worry about. RB2, CJ Anderson, is back on the dud team. Makes another appearance. He didn't do much. He looked bad when he did it. End of story. Wide receiver 1 on the dud team, Mike Evans in his season debut. 3 targets, 0 receptions, 0 points. And he was almost used, not as a decoy, but the offense wasn't ready to focus on him. I don't think he's at 100%. If you are looking for a buy low candidate, find the owner in your league who likes Mike Evans. See if they are pissed off enough to trade him. It'll cost you a little something, but he is going to bounce back, and that could be a very savvy move by you. -0.4 points in most scoring formats. That's bad. Even, Danny Woodhead, that's an issue. Danny Woodhead is an issue. Green is taking targets. Keenan Allen's still number one there. But weeks like this, you got to be kidding me. And then wide receiver 3, Roddy White. A big 0 for White on just one target. Leonard Hankerson, 11 targets across from Julio Jones. Roddy White isn't their number 3 yet, but Hankerson is making some noise. And the tight end, Jimmy Graham, 1 catch for 11 yards. After the game, he kind of, he didn't seem happy with his role in the offense. It was a little passive, it was a little annoying, but they're not using him correctly. You know what Jimmy Graham can do for an offense. And it's great, those valuable pieces, if you're going to use him like this. Ravens allowing 37 points to the Oakland Raiders. My God. Backuppunter.com prior to Andrew Luck doing that. That's a tough one if you're a Luck owner. It won't happen again, but there's certain tiers who are at their position are top 5, top 10 guys, but you still accept the fact there will be a bit of a dud week once or twice. Well, with Andrew Luck, he's kind of on that tier with Aaron Rodgers, Rob Gronkowski, where you expect 16 for 16 great weeks. When that doesn't happen, ooh. And that was a weak loser for a lot of people last night. This is episode 25 of the Backup Punter podcast. We have reached the quarter century anniversary. And after another 25 episodes, I'll learn how to say century without stumbling over it like I just did. Let's get in to the Week 3 sleepers and streamers. I tweeted these out late last night from the Backup Punter on Twitter, at the Backup Punter. Follow along there. And if you don't already, subscribe to the show on iTunes. It's good for you. Low and Cal, who are you going to add from the QB waiver wire this week? The quarterback waiver wire isn't a good place right now in most leagues. And I hesitate to talk about this with such levels of certainty because every league is different, whether it's bigger, smaller, different scoring, different rosters, different numbers of teams. And I do hate when podcasts just talk about, this guy in this league, or you need to add this guy. This guy's a wide receiver 4. Well, shut up. My team doesn't have a wide receiver 4. Or my rosters are huge. This guy's a wide receiver 4 for me, but a 2 in another league. So you can't talk about it just black and white. But in most formats, the quarterback position isn't that appealing on the waiver wire. Now I've got to replace, maybe just get some insurance for Sam Bradford this week because maybe you're going to look to the waiver wire for someone like Tyrod Taylor. He's playing the Miami Dolphins, who haven't figured it out yet. If they can get into a high-scoring game there, maybe that's a good place to look. The best thing that can happen to Tyrod Taylor that game is Ryan Tannehill playing well. If they get into a bit of a barn burner and Taylor's forced to push it downfield, that could be interesting. I've gotten some questions about Derek Carr. I need to see him do that 2 weeks in a row. Definitely I do. But he did that against a good defense. Against a really good defense, who is without Terrell Suggs. But whatever. I'm not ready to jump on him yet. I'm not going to rush out to roster him in any league. But we'll see. And one guy that I'm going to catch some blowback for, but I really don't care. One guy that I would even consider, if I'm a Sam Bradford owner, if my quarterback is injured, if I'm a Tony Romo owner, just for a week or two to get me by, I might look at Ryan Fitzpatrick. If Eric Decker can come back healthy, monitor Eric Decker before you do anything else. But man, Ryan Fitzpatrick is that type of quarterback that I think will just get you 17 to 21 points and stabilize your quarterback position, which isn't the ideal situation. But if you're dealing with a Bradford or a Romo or a Breeze and the rest of your roster is pretty good, Especially if you're dealing with the Bradford, that probably means you picked him late and you got some good skill position players. If that's the case, maybe that's all you need at quarterback. A steady source of 17, 21, 24, 19, that type of thing. It's week 2 and I'm already telling people to add Ryan Fitzpatrick. The NFL never ceases to amaze. Now let's look at the running back group. I think this is Alfred Morris's backfield. At best, for Matt Jones, he'll develop it into a timeshare. But in Washington, there might be enough carries for both of them to go over 12 each game. Maybe Morris gets 18, Jones gets 12. That could be enough in a pinch for a flex. And there's the potential he takes over long term. Devonta Freeman is a running back you should be targeting in the short term. The Atlanta Falcons' Tevin Coleman is out with a rib injury. Could be 1 week, could be 2 or 3. Devonta Freeman will get the carries there. As a running back, I don't like him. I don't think he's that talented. I don't think he's dynamic. I really don't, and that's fine. Sure, he's a great person. But in the scenario he's in Matt Ryan's backfield. He's going to have some dump-offs to him, and he's going to lead the carries. Why not? You have to. If there's a starting running back, I don't care if it's me. Someone with the physical talent of me, which isn't much. If I'm a starting running back in the NFL, you have to roster me. Then you can look at David Johnson of the Arizona Cardinals. There's a few things going in his favor. I don't think that he is going to put up a guaranteed big week this week. I really don't. I think he's still a long-term project. But Andre Ellington, still out for a week or 2. Chris Johnson, he looks old. And Mikey Iupati is back. That's the most important thing. Mikey Iupati is one of the best run blockers in the game. He was Arizona's big off-season addition, which really signaled that they wanted to dedicate to the run. Maybe if David Johnson can even get on the back end of a 60-40 split with CJ0K, then there's going to be some fantasy relevance there. Definitely. Then you can look at Dion Lewis, who might be the number 1 fantasy ad on the waiver wire this week if he's not already owned. I thought Dion Lewis would disappear this week. So did a lot of people, and as always, we are wrong when we're talking about the New England Patriots. LeGarrette Blount returned, and he played 7 snaps. There are going to be weeks where Dion Lewis gets you 1 point at most, because that's how the Patriots game plan. But in this scenario, it looks like he is their lead pass-catching back. It doesn't look like that. He is. He absolutely is their lead pass-catching back. And the Patriots are going to be in a lot of games where they're putting up a lot of points. If Dion Lewis is not rostered in your league, even if you're strong at the position, he's more than worthy of a bench spot. And then Lorenzo Taliaferro is a guy I want you to keep an eye on. More of a, we won't call him a deep sleeper because he does have some ownership in a lot of formats. But with Taliaferro, he's just not a sexy name. People don't get buzzed up about Lorenzo Taliaferro. But Justin Forsett isn't looking fantastic. A lot of this is because the Ravens have left Joe Flacco, surprise, surprise, without really many weapons. So there's a lot of focus on that run game. But if Lorenzo Taliaferro can start to push Justin Forsett, he already is getting the red zone touches, the goal line touches. That's potential. Then looking at wide receiver, the big ad this week will be Travis Benjamin. And we had a reader question over Twitter from Ryan Andrews asking if Travis Benjamin is for real. And I think he asked if he's the next incarnation of Devery Henderson, which brought back some fond memories of a 2-reception, 149 yards for 2 touchdown games from Devery Henderson when he was really clicking with the Saints. Travis Benjamin, 2 receiving touchdowns, a return touchdown this week. He's a guy that I want someone else to take a risk on. I'm not going to put him on my rosters. This could come back to bite me. But the rate that he's producing at right now is hilariously unsustainable. He's not going to score a touchdown on every reception or every second reception. Teams are going to put a safety over top of him now because they know Johnny Manziel likes the guy. You know, Travis Benjamin, if he was a rookie, maybe I'd be more excited because I'd say, wow, you know, this is all we've seen from him. But I've also seen Travis Benjamin look like a damn average receiver, quite frankly. Now, the truth is somewhere in the middle. Somebody is going to add Travis Benjamin and probably win a week with him when he does have another breakout game. But I'm afraid that Travis Benjamin, much like Devery Henderson, could be at risk of a game with 1 reception for 9 yards on 6 targets. That type of thing. So he needs to be added, but I don't know if it's going to be me. Then Michael Crabtree. I guess he's not dead, like we said. Crabtree with 9 receptions, 111 yards, 1 touchdown. But just like Carr, I need to see this again, because Michael Crabtree, towards the tail end with the 49ers, he looked bad. He looked slow. His elite agility had gone. And I think he stopped caring, quite frankly. Now with the Raiders, this is a big sign. This is a good sign. And I might slip him onto the back end of a roster or two. But it's something where I need to see this consistently. How is Crabtree going to react if he gets a little extra coverage next week? Roster him, keep an eye on him. Leonard Hankerson again, like we said, 11 targets to Roddy White's 1 in that offense. He's worth a look. And then a deep sleeper, if you're really desperate, from the Miami Dolphins, Rashard Matthews. He might be the number 2 receiver in Miami right now. Another big day, 6 receptions, 115 yards. He got into the end zone in week 1. He's talented. There's a lot of competition around him, though, so he could get buried at any time. Right now, though, in the short term, he could be worth a flyer. Then looking at tight end, of course, Crockett Gilmore is going to be a big name this week after he put up that 5 receptions, 88 yards, 2 touchdowns. Is he going to repeat it? I don't know. I think he's going to be more of a 3 receptions for 40 yards, and you hope he gets a touchdown. But at the tight end position, any potential is good potential. And then Eric Ebron needs to be rostered in every league. 5 receptions for 43 yards and a touchdown. It was a bit of a garbage touchdown. He didn't do too much with his targets earlier in the game. But the physical talent of this guy is through the roof. And he looks like he's the number 3 target behind Golden Tate and Calvin Johnson. We know that Calvin Johnson can get injured the odd time. Eric Ebron is going to get involved in this game pretty heavily. The Detroit Lions aren't going to run away with anything. They won't hit many times this season where they can, just abandon the passing game. That's not going to happen in Detroit. So you need Eric Ebron unless you're a Gronk, Graham, Kelsey type owner. And then looking to the streaming defenses this week, like I say every week, it counts for 1 win if you win with your defense, just like it counts for a win if you win with your RB1. Jump on a good defense this week. Don't just be satisfied to have a top 10 ranked defense. Some of the matchups that I like, New England at Jacksonville, but New England's probably heavily owned in your league. Carolina versus New Orleans, especially if Drew Brees is not out there. Again, Carolina might have some heavy ownership in your league. You may not be able to get them. Denver versus the Detroit Lions. I'm holding on to Denver in that league that I added them. I think they're going to allow a lot of yardage from Matt Stafford. The key to this game, again, will be turnovers. Getting some turnovers, stopping Amir Abdullah out of the backfield, which looks pretty possible now. But I like Denver a lot in that matchup. And then a couple matchups here that might be a little, towards the back end of the spectrum. Let's not call them sleepers. Let's not do that. But Pittsburgh versus the St. Louis Rams. As long as Todd Gurley's not playing, as long as St. Louis's running back situation is still a little cloudy, I like the Steelers to get to Nick Foles. I do. And the Steelers' cornerbacks, their secondary, I'm not wild about, but who are you wild about in the St. Louis Rams receiving core? Le'Veon Bell will be back. I think that will help time of possession a lot. That's an attractive matchup. And then going real deep, one that I might be risky enough to try out in a couple leagues, the Atlanta Falcons versus the Dallas Cowboys. I like what Atlanta is doing. I like what Dan Quinn has done there. And if you've got Brandon Weeden at quarterback, if you have no Dez Bryant, if you have a running game that still needs to figure it out, then that's an attractive matchup for a streaming defense. If you're in a deep league, a league where the waiver wire just doesn't work out for you in terms of matchups this week, take a flyer in Atlanta. It's a boom or bust one because they have not been a good defense for a lot of years. But there's no time like the present to jump on the Atlanta Falcons. Just seeing coming over Twitter here right now as we wrap up the show, tweet from Ian Rappaport reads, Kiko Alonso's injury isn't quite as bad as Eagles thought. But Andrews, I'm assuming that's Dr. James Andrews, a guy you never want to meet, but Andrews and others must decide if he can play through it or if his season is over. So I started reading that tweet as a sign of optimism, and it ended in the exact same spot we started in. So that's at least an update. It's not as bad as they think, but again, it's one of these things where they need to make a decision long term. It's a strange time for the Eagles. It's a strange time for the Saints, for the Cowboys, for a lot of these teams we're used to seeing succeed. But at the same time, we have teams like the Bills who are really making some noise. And that's what makes the NFL great. I shouldn't say makes the NFL great. That's what makes professional football great. Professional football just happens to be played in this horrible league called the NFL. But, once September rolls around, once the games hit TV, we find it a little easier to look past that. So best of luck on the waiver wire today on Tuesday, September 22nd. There's still lots of talent on that waiver wire. And if you have any questions, fantasy football questions, life questions, questions about recipes, reach out to me over Twitter anytime during the week at The Backup Punter. Send an email to thebackupppunter@gmail.com. Any questions you have, we'll put them on the show. I'll get right back to you. Waiver questions, start or sit questions, whatever you may have. So subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, on Stitcher, on YouTube, and check out the rest of the great shows at the Dynasty Sports Empire Podcast Network. Don't let me be the only voice in your ear about fantasy sports. Check out those great shows. Subscribe to those as well. Tell them I sent you. So again, this is Keegan Matheson signing off from the quarter-century episode of the podcast and hoping that every punt you kick in life stops on the 1-yard line. Let's talk next week, and let's hope things are going better on all of our fantasy rosters.